At 7:46 on Friday evening, the ground beneath one of the most dangerous volcanoes on Earth cracked open, and it happened right underneath a city where hundreds of thousands of people live. A magnitude 4.7 earthquake tore through Campi Flegrei, the vast volcanic caldera just west of Naples, and it wasn't an ordinary earthquake at all. This was the volcano itself doing something, and it was the strongest tremor ever recorded there since scientists began monitoring the area. Boulders came crashing down onto parked cars. The power went out. Trains stopped inside tunnels that run directly beneath the caldera. And tonight, people are sleeping in their cars because they're too frightened to go back inside their own homes. If you want to actually understand what's happening under Naples right now, and why one of the world's top volcanologists is using the phrase rolling the dice, stay with me and hit subscribe. Because this is the kind of story that deserves the real facts, not the hype. Let me walk you through exactly what just happened. To understand why this quake matters so much, you first have to understand what Campi Flegrei actually is, because it's not a mountain like the volcanoes you're picturing. There's no towering peak, no classic cone. Instead, it's a massive collapsed crater, a caldera roughly 8 miles across, and the astonishing part is that it's not empty, it's full of people. Towns, neighborhoods, homes, schools, and roads all sit directly on top of it. The city of Pozzuoli sits right in the heart of it, and in the greater Naples area, more than 3 million people live in and around this restless giant. So when I say the ground broke beneath a city, I mean the volcano and the city are the same place. That's what makes this so different from a quake in California or Japan, and it's exactly why you can't compare the numbers the same way. Here's the crucial distinction. When you hear magnitude 4.7, your instinct might be to shrug. In many parts of the world, a 4.7 is a rattle, a few cracked plates, nothing to lose sleep over, but this was not a tectonic earthquake caused by 2 plates grinding past each other. This was a volcanic earthquake, driven by the movements happening inside the caldera itself, and it struck at a depth of only about 3 kilometers, which is extremely shallow. A shallow quake concentrates its energy right at the surface, so the shaking hits far harder than the magnitude alone would suggest. Add to that the fact that many of the buildings here are old masonry structures, some of them centuries old, never built to withstand this kind of stress, and you start to see why a 4.7 in this specific place is genuinely dangerous. The quake struck at 7:46 in the evening on July 31st, and its epicenter was located in the Solfatara area. If you've never heard of the Solfatara, it's one of the most active spots in the entire caldera, a crater that constantly hisses with steam and volcanic gases. It's exactly the kind of place volcanologists watch most nervously. And this is the location that just produced the strongest tremor ever measured in Campi Flegrei during the modern monitoring era. Sit with that for a second. Scientists have been carefully instrumenting this caldera for decades, and in all that time they have never recorded a quake this strong here. That record didn't just get broken. It got broken right beneath the most sensitive part of the volcano. The damage came fast. Across Pozzuoli and the surrounding neighborhoods, buildings were shaken hard, and reports came in of cracked walls and structural damage. In one of the most striking scenes, boulders and rocks broke loose and cascaded down, crushing cars parked below the cliffs. Power went out across the area. The metro and rail services were disrupted, with trains halted inside the very tunnels that passed directly under the caldera, which is a chilling detail when you really think about it. People sitting in carriages inside a volcano while it shakes. 4 people were injured in the chaos. And beyond the physical damage, there was something harder to measure, but just as real, raw fear. People poured out into the streets. Many chose to spend the night outside, sleeping in their vehicles rather than risk being inside a building that might not survive the next jolt. Because here's the thing about this event. It wasn't just one earthquake. The 4.7 was the peak of a swarm, a whole cluster of earthquakes striking one after another. The swarm had actually begun days earlier, building through the final week of July, with dozens of smaller tremors rattling the caldera. Then came the big one, and even after it hit, the ground didn't settle down. The quakes kept coming through the night, one after another, each one giving another shove to buildings that were already cracked and weakened. That's the part that wears people down. It's not a single shock you can recover from. It's the relentlessness of it, the way the earth simply refuses to go quiet, each new tremor reopening the fear all over again. And the smaller quakes barely make the official lists. The monitoring network doesn't even catalog the tiniest ones, which means the true number of tremors is likely several times higher than what shows up on the public record. Now, to understand why scientists are so on edge, you have to understand the slow motion process this quake is part of, and it has a name that sounds almost gentle. It's called bradyseism. In plain terms, bradyism is the slow rising and falling of the ground caused by pressure changes deep beneath the caldera. Right now, Campi Flegrei is in a rising phase, and it has been for a long time. The ground is literally swelling upward. As of earlier this year, the total uplift at one key location in Pozzuoli had reached around 1.5 meters, and it's still climbing at a rate of roughly 15 millimeters every single month. Think about what that means. Something down below is pushing the entire surface upward, month after month, year after year. And when the ground is being forced up like that, it fractures, and those fractures are the earthquakes we're feeling. The officials have a careful way of describing all this. They call it a bradyseismic phenomenon, which technically it is, but a lot of people who live there, and many who study it, feel that language downplays what's really going on, because this isn't a brand new event. The ground uplift at Campi Flegrei began way back in the 1950s. The seismic activity, the earthquakes, started in the 1970s. And, rather than fading away, the whole process has been slowly, steadily escalating ever since, with the uplift accelerating notably from around 2005 onward. For the past few years, the caldera has been producing magnitude 4 and above earthquakes, and the residents have been living under the growing weight of it, tremor after tremor, each one a little stronger than before. This 4.7 is the loudest note yet in a song that's been building for decades. And this is where the history becomes genuinely unsettling, because Campi Flegrei has done this before. The caldera's last eruption was in 1538, an event that built an entirely new hill called Monte Nuovo, or New Mountain, in a matter of days. But here's what should make you pay attention. That eruption didn't come out of nowhere. It was preceded by a long buildup of exactly this kind of unrest. Ground uplift and earthquakes stretching back over a century before the volcano finally erupted. When scientists compare the pattern unfolding today with the pattern that led up to 1538, the similarities are hard to ignore. That doesn't mean an eruption is coming. It absolutely does not guarantee that. But it does mean the current episode of unrest is following a script the volcano has performed before, and the last time it ran that script, it ended in an eruption. I want to be very careful and very honest here, because this is exactly where a lot of channels lose the plot, and you deserve better than fear-mongering. No one can predict this volcano. No scientist can tell you it will erupt, and no scientist can tell you it won't. Over the last 3,000 years, there have really only been 2 clear episodes of major uplift and seismicity like this one, and only one of them, the buildup to 1538, ended in an eruption. So the honest scientific position is uncertainty. The ground is rising, the quakes are getting stronger, and the process resembles past pre-eruption behavior. But that is a warning sign, not a countdown clock. Anyone who tells you they know the date this thing will blow is selling you something. The truth is more sobering and more responsible than that. We're watching a dangerous volcano do dangerous things, and we don't get to know how the story ends. That brings me to the voice that cuts through all the reassurance, a scientist who has been sounding the alarm for years. His name is Giuseppe De Natale, a volcanologist and research director who has spent his career studying this caldera. He's careful to say he speaks in a personal capacity based on his own scientific judgment rather than as an official institute statement, and that distinction itself tells you something. It means his personal assessment is more urgent than the cautious official line. And the phrase he's been using to describe our situation is blunt. He says we're rolling the dice. He says it's time and that we are already far behind schedule to prepare the entire region for every possible scenario. And yes, that includes the possibility of an eruption. He describes the short-term probability of an eruption as low, but then he adds a phrase that should stop you cold. He says that probability is by no means negligible. And he points out, quite rightly, that all catastrophic events are by definition unlikely, right up until the moment they happen. What frustrates De Natale most is not the volcano, it's the human response to it. He points to history to make his case. Back in 1970, and again in the unrest of 1983 and 1984, the governments of the time took the threat seriously enough to carry out evacuations of parts of Pozzuoli. Real, significant protective measures. But in the decades since, he argues, far too little has been done to genuinely safeguard the people living on top of this thing. And in the meantime, life in the danger zone just carries on as normal, which he finds almost impossible to accept. Development continues. Major public events are still planned in the most at-risk areas, concerts, tourism, all of it drawing even more people into the caldera, even as the same area struggles with railway and metro closures caused by the ground deformation and the volcanic gases seeping up from below. He raises a question that's genuinely haunting when you sit with it. Imagine one of those big planned events, a packed concert, thousands of people gathered together in the heart of the caldera. Now, imagine an earthquake like Friday's, or a stronger one, striking in that moment. The panic, the crush, the narrow ancient streets that were never designed for a mass escape. He's pointing at a scenario where the volcano doesn't even need to erupt to cause a catastrophe. The panic alone in the wrong place at the wrong time could be deadly. And when you look at footage of those tight, winding streets, boulders already blocking some routes, cars parked everywhere, you understand exactly what he's worried about. How do you evacuate a city built on top of a volcano through streets like that? There's one more thing De Natale says that deserves your full attention, and it's a warning about complacency. He notes that in the press and on social media, people keep pointing to small dips in activity as signs that the danger is passing. A slightly quieter week, a slightly smaller tremor, and suddenly the mood becomes, see, it's calming down, nothing to worry about. And he pushes back on this hard. He argues you cannot read the volcano's future from tiny wiggles in a trend that is, overall, clearly still rising. The temptation to feel safe again after each scare is powerful and completely human, but he sees it as dangerous because it lets everyone put off the hard, expensive, necessary work of actually preparing. His message, stripped down, is this: don't let the quiet moments fool you. The underlying trend is going one direction, and it's up. So what would a worst-case scenario actually look like? This is where the numbers turn genuinely grim. The concern among experts is what happens if the caldera produces an earthquake around magnitude 5 or slightly above, which is considered within the realm of possibility for this volcano. In an area packed with old, fragile masonry buildings and hundreds of thousands of residents, a quake at that level could cause widespread building collapses and mass casualties. And that's just the earthquake risk before you even get to the possibility of an actual eruption. Structural experts who know the region have painted a bleak picture of what a strong quake would do to Naples, and it is not a picture anyone wants to dwell on. The tragedy is that many residents simply cannot leave. This isn't a wealthy area. You can't just sell a home that sits on an active volcano during a crisis, and you can't easily afford to start over somewhere safe. So people stay, not because they don't understand the risk, but because they feel they have no other choice. That's the human reality underneath every one of these headlines. There's also a broader worry that De Natale and others have raised, based on the volcano's own history. The eruption in 1538 was magmatic, driven by rising molten rock. But there's another type of eruption that can strike a system like this one, and it's arguably scarier because of how fast it can happen. It's called a phreatic eruption, a steam-driven blast that occurs when superheated water flashes explosively without much magma involved at all. The terrifying thing about phreatic eruptions is that they can happen with little to no warning. Studies of Campi Flegrei have flagged exactly this possibility, an eruption that could arrive suddenly before anyone has time to react. And historically, some volcanic sequences begin with a smaller phreatic event before building towards something larger. That combination, high population plus the potential for a no-warning event, is precisely what keeps volcanologists up at night about this place. So let me pull all of this together, because it's a lot, and I want you to walk away understanding it clearly rather than just feeling scared. Here's what we actually know. On Friday, July 31st, Campi Flegrei produced a magnitude 4.7 earthquake, the strongest ever recorded there in the monitoring era, striking shallow and right under the Solfatara. It was the peak of an ongoing swarm that damaged buildings, cut power, halted trains, sent boulders onto cars, injured 4 people, and drove residents to sleep outside in fear. It's part of a decades-long process of ground uplift and escalating seismicity that has been accelerating since 2005, a process that echoes the unrest before the caldera's last eruption in 1538. And a leading volcanologist is warning, in personal but pointed terms, that the region is dangerously underprepared, that complacency is the enemy, and that while an eruption remains unlikely in the short term, the possibility is by no means something we can dismiss. Here's what we don't know, and this part matters just as much. We don't know if this leads to anything bigger. We don't know if the swarm fades out in the coming days, as previous swarms have, or if it's the opening act of something more serious. Nobody can predict that, and anyone who claims to is guessing. What responsible science tells us is to watch the signals, respect the risk, and prepare, while resisting both the urge to panic and the urge to pretend it's all normal. Both of those reactions are dangerous in their own way. What should you watch for going forward? Keep an eye on whether the uplift continues at that 15 millimeters a month pace or accelerates further. Because faster uplift means more pressure building below, watch the size and frequency of the earthquakes. If the swarm quiets and the quakes shrink, that's reassuring in the short term. If they keep climbing toward and past magnitude 5, that's the direction that worries scientists most. And watch what the authorities do next, whether they raise the alert level and whether they finally begin the serious preparation that experts like De Natale have been demanding for years. Because in the end, the volcano is only half the story. The other half is whether the people living on top of it are ready. And right now, by many accounts, they simply aren't. My heart genuinely goes out to the people of Pozzuoli and the wider Naples area tonight, the families who fled their cracked homes, the ones sleeping in their cars, the parents wondering whether the school their kids sit in every day could survive the next tremor. They didn't choose to live on a volcano. Their families have been there for generations, long before anyone understood what lay beneath their feet. And now they're caught between a restless earth and a set of impossible choices. The least the rest of us can do is understand their situation honestly, without turning their fear into cheap spectacle. I'll be following this closely and bringing you updates as the situation develops, because a swarm like this can change day to day, and the coming week will tell us a great deal about which way this is heading. If this breakdown helped you actually understand what's happening beneath Naples, instead of just adding to the noise, do me a favor and hit that like button, because it genuinely helps more people find accurate information when they're searching for answers during a scary event like this. Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts, especially if you have family or friends in the region. And subscribe with notifications turned on, because when the next major development hits at Campi Flegrei, whether it calms down or escalates, I'll be right here breaking it down for you clearly and honestly. This is W for Weather, where we follow the real science of our restless planet. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.